Hi, and welcome to the Independently Unbound podcast. It's Jeriel.
Calix.
Patricia.
Wataru.
The song you are currently listening to is actually the instrumental version of Calix's original song called My Fool, which you can listen to on Spotify.
So, today's episode we'll be discussing topics that circle around achieving Canada's independence, from the Chanak Affair, the Halibut Treaty, the King-Byng Affair, and the Statute of Westminster.
These all have the significance of contributing towards independence for Canada. So sit tight, lay back,
and maybe even hydrate yourself with some drinks.
And just chill. Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Let's get started. Hi, my name is Jeriel, and today I'll be introducing you to the Chanak Affair, crisis, incident. You can call it however you like, honestly. First of all, it was a war scare that happened around September 1922, and it was between the United Kingdom and the government of the Grand National Assembly in Turkey. The affair was actually Canadian Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King's first major foreign policy test. So, William Lyon Mackenzie King was a very dominant political figure in an era of major changes, because for almost 22 years, he had been the longest-serving Prime Minister of Canada. And I can't even stay committed to most of the things in my life, let alone 22 years. Anyways, he steered Canada through industrialization, much of the Great Depression, and the Second World War. By the time he left office, Canada had already achieved greater independence from Britain and a stronger international voice, which is extremely impressive considering that he did all that in 22 years. So, Turkish forces were threatening British troops that were stationed in Turkey after World War I because in the 1920s, military from Britain, France, and Greece occupied these really large portions of Western Turkey under the Treaty of Sevres, which I hope I'm pronouncing right, but it was originally signed between the allies of World War I and the Ottoman Empire. So then during the fall of 1922, nationalist Turkish forces then proceeded to threaten British forces and even succeeded in pushing the Greek army out of the country. Well, because they hated the presence of foreigners and foreign troops. So, of course, naturally, Canada was expected to support Britain with their military forces. Even the British Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, expected Canada to fall in line with Britain's wishes, because, as did everyone, honestly. However, King declined to automatically provide support from Canada's military to Britain. On September 15th, Britain sent out this telegram to the Dominions in order to provide soldiers to the crisis. During this time, Canada was actually an independent member of the League of Nations, but they didn't have a distinct foreign policy nor a foreign affairs minister. Even so, William King was pretty non-committal on whether Canada would send out troops to Turkey. Even conservative opposition leader Arthur Meighen criticized the King government for being unloyal towards Britain. However, King's cabinet agreed that only the parliament could decide on these type of matters, but the crisis in Turkey had already passed before they could make a decision. So, at this point, the British were unsure if Canada was loyal to Britain because they basically kind of just ditched them while they were being threatened. By 1923 next year, all the foreign troops were being withdrawn and Turkish armies had a firm control of their country. Remember the British guy that I mentioned earlier, the Prime Minister of Britain, David Lloyd George? Does it ring a bell? Yeah, it didn't really end well for him because he was actually handling it all with a tough approach, which then led to the breakdown of his coalition government as well as the end of his political career. And meanwhile, in Canada, King's attitude about the crisis actually meant that he wanted greater independence for the country in terms of its foreign policy. Besides, the Chanak crisis wasn't even considered a revolution in Canadian affairs because prime ministers since John A. Macdonald were reluctant to involve Canada in all the unnecessary drama that didn't actually threaten Britain itself. Same, honestly, though. If I was them, I wouldn't involve myself in drama or anything that isn't even my business to truly begin with. They took minding your own business too seriously. nowadays, if you wanted independence from someone, you just block them.
So in 1923, Canada and the United States of America sort of just worked together to create this treaty called the Halibut Treaty to protect halibut stocks on the northwest coast of North America. So basically it kind of just established the International Pacific Halibut Commission, or the IPHC to put it shortly, to kind of just manage the halibut stocks of the coast of British Columbia. And Alaska. Yeah, so this was kind of like a very significant moment in Canadian history because it kind of just marked the first time that Canada had negotiated an international treaty without the British involvement. So it was kind of like we kind of like just did something for ourselves in that moment without like any like involvement with the British. Yeah, you get it. And prior to the Halibut Treaty, Britain had always been involved in every negotiation that would kind of ratify the resulting document. So, however, when Canada chose to negotiate the new treaty without the British involvement, Britain was kind of like, that's what the hell? And they kind of protested against that, and the Prime Minister, Mackenzie King, argued that it was Canada's issue and thus only our concern and not Britain's. So because of that, the King threatened to send independent representation to Washington, D.C. if Britain intervened, at which point Britain kind of backed off that way. And by negotiating the treaty on its own, Canada was like able to show that we were capable of handling our own affairs without like any part of the British intervention. So the treaty was signed by Ernest Lapointe. I have no idea if I said that right, but Canada's Minister of Marines and Fisheries, and by Charles Evan Hughes and the United States Secretary of the State. It was modest from American point of view, but it was extremely important to Canada in symbolic terms because it was Canada's preference not to negotiate the treaty with any British delegate at the table, nor to seek any ratification from the British Parliament. Like how did the British kind of react to it? The British kind of just wished to sign the treaty along with Canada as they always had, but the Prime Minister just argued that the matter was like our concern, and like again they didn't have any like sort of involvement with this issue, like it's our business, not theirs, so they shouldn't appear as like contracting party either in the treaty's preamble or as like signatory.
Hi, this is Patricia Lagas, and I will be talking about the King-Byng Affair. This event in history was a major event that contributed to Canada's independence, and that is because there are two important figures who played a major role in this event. So, these two important roles went by the names of William Lyon Mackenzie King, who was the Prime Minister and Liberal leader of Canada. And on the other hand, there was a man named Julian Byng, who was the Governor General. Now, let's go and talk about King. He was elected Prime Minister during the year of 1921 and served up until 1926. Dating forward 4 years later, there was another election that happened, and that was when the affair happened as well. That was on October 29th, when the Liberals had won 101 seats and the Conservatives had won 116, as well as the 28 seats that consisted of the Progressives, the Labour, and the Independents. So because this has happened and the Conservatives won against the Liberals, they king, had to do something. So what he did was he decided to turn to his governor general and request to dissolve parliament as well as calling fresh elections. However, there was shocking news, and that was because the governor general King-Byng had just flat out refused and declined his request. Now this was very shocking news at the time because no governor general had ever refused a prime minister's request. So because his request was declined and refused by the governor general, King decided to go to the House of Commons to let them decide who should govern, which was his right. But despite all that King had done and all the things that he had tried, he was still unable to get back his power. So in that case, the conservatives still became in power. And because of the request that King-Byng asked them to make a minority government, Arthur Meighen had been elected as prime minister. So that would mean that King resigned and he informed all of the parliament that he was no longer the prime minister. Now, dating to the time that the conservatives were in power, they were very unsuccessful. And that was because during the time they were in power, they were very unsuccessful in many different aspects of ruling. So, afterwards, Byng had just approved a request from Arthur, which was to make another election. And that was when the election was called, which was dating on September 14 of 1926. That was when King had victoriously won the election, and that was when he became prime minister again. But talking about his speech, and during the time he was running for prime minister, he declared and stated that the thing that people would respond to is the making of our nation. And because of the thing that he stated, he was able to win victoriously, and out of 245 House seats, King's Liberals were able to take a majority of 128 seats, and that is a lot. After that had occurred, there was also another time during 1926 where the King-Byng Affair had played a very significant role, which was in the Imperial Conference, as well as the Balfour Report that happened and stated that Britain and its dominions were of equal status. Now this plays a really big part in Canada's independence. The reasoning behind that is because that Balfour Report meant that Britain would no longer have legal access or legal control over the dominions, which consisted of Canada as well. So, hooray! That means that they would no longer have to be in control of Britain, and that was the beginning of Canada's independence. So thank you for listening, and moving on.
Hi, I'm Ataru. Today, I want to talk about Canada and British relations. First, I will talk about the article of Statute of Westminster, 1931. The Statute of Westminster is a British law that was passed on 11 December 1931. And it was Canada's all but final achievement of the independence from Britain. Then, in 1926, Balfour Report declared the United Kingdom and its dominions to be constitutionally equal in state, and its recommendations were enacted. These events have changed Canada dramatically. I think a lot has changed since their relationship became equal. For example, Canada today is a wonderful country that welcomes people from many different countries and where people from many different countries can live. But if it had still been a British colony, it would not have become such a country. Also, Canada created its own constitution and proved its state an independent country. Next is about Canada and British relations. Canada used to be a British colony. Canada entered World War I, 1914 to 1919, as a member of British Empire. In recognition of this, in 1926, after the war, the United Kingdom granted diplomatic rights to Canada. Then, when the British Commonwealth was established by the Charter of Westminster in 1931, Canada became a member of British Commonwealth and achieved substitutional independence with equal sovereignty with the United Kingdom. Back to the Westminster story. One thing that I think is important is establishing shipping law for Canada vessels at sea, or apply criminal law to Canadian armed forces serving abroad, because these largely indicate that Canada is on equal footing with the United Kingdom. In conclusion, the Statute of Westminster is very important because Canada is what it is today because of its independence from Great Britain.
What do you think?
Sorry.
What do you think?
I think mine's more important.
Why?
Wow. Okay. I think mine's more important because this treaty was signed without the presence of a British official, although usually Britain negotiates and signs the treaties on Canada's behalf, and the Prime Minister can convince Britain to allow this by arguing that this matter affected only Canada and America. Yeah. Did you get all of that?
No, I didn't actually.
Oh, okay. Would you like me to elaborate?
Yeah, go ahead. Why is it more important than ours,
Because
in terms
this
of...
granted Canada independence, from British regulations and the freedom to pass and repeal our laws with our own legal system, rather than being just pretty much run by Britain the whole time.
I mean, I'd say that mine's pretty important because it changed the whole entire international affairs system between Canada and basically the whole entire world. I think that's why mine's more important. I've literally had beef with Britain.
I love that.
That's why I'd say mine was more important. Especially since it's the first time that Canada has ever refused to support Britain, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to do that.
It's true.
It's
true.
Yeah. So, Patty, what's yours?
Well, mine was the King-Byng Affair.
Yeah.
And I think it's important because basically all the things that happened after the King-Byng Affair contributed to its independence, because there was the Balfour Report, there was the Imperial Conference, and all those contributed in the way that how do I say this? Basically, Britain was in control of Canada at the time, right? And then Canada wasn't really free of Britain, and because of
I get it though. Honestly, I didn't even expect Canada to in my event. I didn't expect Canada to kind of refuse Britain's wishes.
Yeah, mine's kind of the same. We both had no involvement with
I think that's what we have in common
Yes.
is within ours. So, what's yours about?
Mine was about State of Westminster.
Yeah.
And then I think mine is the most important event compared to others.
Yeah.
Because it's just in my opinion, but without this event, Canada would not be an independent country, and Canada might still be a British colony. And
Yeah, since like
Yeah.
It's like all connected with each other.
Yeah, all connected with like Britain mostly. I say Britain is whack. So which one do you guys think is more important? Like in terms of all of us, you know?
mine's just about like fish.
Because like even though mine is like the first, you know, to like kind of rebel against Britain, like I think everyone kind of has like a really good or like great significance in history. So I think we should settle it. Like, what do you guys think is the most important?
You guys want to do rock, paper, scissors?
Rock, paper, scissors. I mean, like we could, but
No. Well, I mean, like in my opinion, I feel like, I don't really know.
you're just agree on it.
No, because like each of their own events.
Because mine was mostly on international affairs.
I think yours
like,
is more important than mine because mine's literally just about like fishing grounds.
yeah, but you said it changed like the legal system or something like that. You know.
No, I was just talking about like why it's important that Canada has independence. Like, it's not like the Halibut Treaty like affected our law system. Like, it was literally just about fish.
That's true. It's true.
And like the only reason why it was special because like it was one of the first few treaties without British involvement. But again, it's just about fish.
Yeah.
Like, it's just about halibut. Some people don't even eat fish.
That's
I don't
true
eat
though. You don't?
No.
Seriously? Oh, I love fish.
We should have recorded that.
It is recording.
Oh.
I knew that.
I mean, personally, I like salmon. Personally.
Okay. I don't.
But you're Filipino. How could you not?
I just can, you know.
Are you like vegetarian?
Not necessarily. Like, there's certain meats that I don't eat, but that doesn't make me a vegetarian.
Okay, so should we just settle on the fact that all of ours is important, equally as important?
Yes.
Okay, well then, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
And have a good day. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.